Planning your next post-COVID vacation? Be prepared with the help and expert advice of the Travel Guys.
Hello and welcome to the Travel Guys, our weekly update of what's happening and what's new in the travel industry. I'm delighted to have my guest today, Brent Thomas, and Brent is the President of TAANZ, the Travel Agents Association of New Zealand, as well as Chief Operating Officer for the House of Travel Group. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
Who would be a travel agent right now?
It's a really good question. I'm sure many of us in the industry are looking at ourselves and going, should we have chosen a different career? But the reality is it's an industry where once you get into it, you stay with it. You love people, and therefore you tend to want to help people, and that's the kind of people that come into this industry. And the last 15 months has proven that we are needed.
Wow, I've been around approximately 100 years, and so it's very hard to get out of the travel business once you're into it. Brent, can you just explain TAANZ, the Travel Agents Association of New Zealand? You're the president. What actually is TAANZ?
So it's a voluntary organisation for people to belong if they are travel agents in New Zealand. However, what it does represent from a travel agent's point of view is about 95% of the outbound market. So almost all travel agents are members of TAANZ, and the reason they are is because of some of the benefits it gives the New Zealand consumer, and also make sure that we've got certain regulations internally that make sure that people are complying with good practice to run a business.
What does the member of the public get out of dealing with a TAANZ bonded agent? I think it's really important to stress that, particularly with what's happened in the last 15 months.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that people's money is basically very secure, because what happens is client funds are separated from trading funds. So it's really, really important that people understand that as those funds come in, they sit into an account which is separate from running the business. What happens is the money then goes to the supplier when it's due to be paid, and only after that time do the travel agents take their share out of it to pay their expenses. So it's very, very secure from that point of view, self-regulated in that point of view, but we certainly have an annual review and annual audit of everybody's accounts to make sure they are adhering to those principles.
Yeah, I think it's really important, that stress that I remember a gentleman he's well out of the travel industry now, and he started up an agency. He could talk the talk, but he had this firm picture in his mind that because the money was in his bank account, it was his. And that's the antithesis of what you're describing, and why it's so important to stress that client funds must stay in a client fund account.
Most definitely, and we've seen that over the last 15 months. COVID's been a disaster for our industry, very, very difficult for the New Zealand consumer. But you'll have noticed for all that issues that we've faced and all the costs that we've had to endure with very little income, we haven't had major collapses or any issues in terms of people who are TAANZ or Travel Agent Association of New Zealand bonded travel agents. Yeah. So we've had some incidences where people have gone under in the industry, but they're not a member of TAANZ. It's really, really important.
That's extraordinary, actually. I wasn't aware of that. I know of businesses, mutual friends of ours have had to virtually close their doors, but they've hung on by their fingernails and they've still kept trading. And I think crucial tip from my experience, that no clients have missed out on any money that was due to them. If it was through no fault of the travel agents. So the agents have had some extraordinarily difficult times getting money back from overseas for people, correct?
Well, most definitely. So when we started COVID, there was nearly $1.8 billion overseas with suppliers. So that's a massive amount. I think, not sure that everyone realises just how much cash that goes through a travel agency through New Zealand. But yeah, so there was a lot of money sitting overseas with suppliers, which we've had to handle over the last 15 months. And it is extraordinary. Here we are 15 months into this, and no member of the Travel Agents Association has defaulted on any client fund. And that's the same for the last few years as well.
Again, even though I've been in the business a long time, I did not realise that there had been no defaults at all.
It's a testament to how the people run their businesses within the Travel Agents Association, and it's also how we monitor it as well. So people have good security by booking with a travel agent who is bonded with TAANZ. We've still got about $500 million to work our way through, and we'll continue to do that because we are here to help the New Zealand consumer. Because we recognise without a travel agent, Customers would have to deal with all those suppliers individually, and that's a nightmare because they just don't know even who the supplier is in some cases.
Of course, yes, and there's the trickle-down effect again, because it might be an operator in South Africa, but that operator might be in Kruger Park and they work through a tour operator in Johannesburg, and that they work through a tour wholesaler somewhere else, and so there could be 4 or 5 people involved in that particular transaction.
Yeah, very difficult, and that's one of the things we struggle with sometimes, to get the New Zealand consumer to understand, to your point, the money is not sitting with us. If the funds come back from a supplier and the customer has asked for a refund, the money gets refunded to the customer. It's as simple as that. A lot of it, though, is still held in credit with suppliers to be used at a later date.
Have many travel agents simply closed down, Brent?
Yeah, about a third of the travel agents have closed their doors. There's a number who are still open, but they really are only trading on very skeleton hours. A number of people are still in the industry, but they've actually got a secondary job because literally the income stream for a travel agent has dried up over the last 15 months.
By 95% was a figure I heard.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So as an industry, we've lost about a third of the membership, but actually within that, the employee numbers have gone from 5,000 to around 1,500. So
Wow.
we've lost about 70%, 75% of the industry. Unfortunately, also it impacts females more than males. It's a female-dominated industry. It's also one where the ownership is nearly 50-50 across the industry as well. So it's quite an interesting industry from that point of view, how female-orientated it is. Often they are the primary breadwinner in the family. And the difficulty then is getting an equal job somewhere in their community, particularly in some parts of New Zealand where job security is not maybe as great as other parts, say, in some of the bigger cities.
Yeah, and that's really important, that 50-50 female-male, and it's always been my observation that it's very much a female-dominated industry, and it's always been level pegging as far as pricing goes, as far as being paid or salaries goes. There's never been an issue in the travel business.
No, it's definitely an equal opportunity and definitely an equal pay situation. The reality is us mere males are not very good at multitasking. I think that's probably part of the reason. It's a very difficult job. People I don't sometimes understand just how complex it is to be a travel agent, how many things you're juggling, how many clients you're juggling at one time. But all that knowledge that these travel agents have adds a huge amount of value to a consumer.
I was a travel agent many, many years ago, and I had the luxury then of working in airfare as a first class fare and an economy class fare.
Yeah.
And you had a number of miles you could fly within that fare. And if someone wanted to go from Auckland to London, they could stop wherever they like. You just literally added up the miles, and if it fell within the miles allowance on that fare, that was it. So all you had to be able to do is add up figures. Now when I look at a comparative P&R impression to name record and the amount of fare options that are available there.
It's incredible. Pre-COVID there was just under 30 airlines flying to New Zealand. Now if I walk down the main streets of any city in New Zealand and stop somebody, they'd be struggling to name 10 of them, realistically. So there's a huge number of options pre-COVID, and one of the tricks coming back out of this is going to be how many can we get to come back to New Zealand. And it's not just about travel, it's about moving export goods as well and bringing imports as well. So a plane works on 4 components: passengers in, passengers out, cargo in and cargo out, and all of those are important. So we as a country, we need to be able to entice those airlines back. When you get that capacity, you get competition, and competition is great for the New Zealand consumer. That'll drive the pricing down.
Yeah. I've noticed, particularly Brent, since COVID, that the advent of the travel broker concept has come into play more strongly, and I think it will continue to grow. Can you just explain the concept as a travel consultant, as someone who works in bricks and mortar and gets paid a wage to be there? A travel broker, can you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, so it is definitely an evolution. If you go back a few years, everybody basically worked in a bricks and mortar store, local retail store on the high street, main street, wherever, and you popped in to see them. With the advent of online, was a disruptor to the actual bricks and mortar. And then we've now got brokers. So a broker is a bit like, say, a mortgage broker. They'll come and visit you. The way that they get compensated is they need to make a sale, which they then get some commission from it, and that's how they drive their revenue. What's interesting to note, though, pre-COVID is bricks and mortars hadn't gone away. In fact, the sales through the bricks and mortar or retail store had continued to grow over the last few years, even though we have online store coming in and we have the broker channel as well. I think one of the things that the New Zealand consumer needs to be really aware of with the online is who are they dealing with, because who are they going to be protected by? So if they deal with a New Zealand broker or a retail travel agent, they're going to be protected by New Zealand consumer law. If you book online, you become a consumer of wherever that online company is based. So you could be Poland, you could be out of South America, who knows? And so by having someone locally, there's a lot of protection from the New Zealand consumer.
I can remember the Icelandic eruptions about 10 years ago. I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
That was, if anything, it drove people back to travel agent stores. It was that one. I mean, just for viewers, when the eruption happened, flights closed down basically right throughout Europe. And if you'd booked online, you had to go to each different airline, every component, every booking you'd had to try and change. If you'd booked through a travel agent, I'm stuck here for 2 days, can you change everything by 2 days to put the phone down?
Exactly.
It's done for you.
It's that simplistically, and what we know is going forward out of COVID, travel is going to be more complex than it was previously. We don't know the requirements, even when you got the bubble with Australia. Is that going to change? Is there going to be need for saliva testing as our borders open up to other countries, or Australia's borders open up to other countries? So even what was considered a simple booking to Australia may become more complex, but definitely longer haul bookings are going to be more complex.
Yeah, it's definitely going to go back to, in my day, again, going back many years, you had your two documents when you travelled anyway, your passport and your smallpox vaccination certificate. And the smallpox or yellow fever, depending what part of the world you went, but it was as important as your passport. We're going to see an electronic version of that, I'm quite sure, for the next couple of years at least.
Yeah, definitely, and that's already in play now with IATA, which is they've got the travel pass, and then we've got
IATA being
the international aid. It's the how the airlines all talk to each other and bring cohesion between the whole of the industry, because there are, again, over 200 airlines in the world, and obviously it's to get all that information, you need to go through one sort of area. So we're definitely going to see that going forward, that there is going to be a requirement for a consumer to have all those things. But it is also, even right now, if you're going to one country, you might have to have a test within 48 hours of arrival. Other countries are 72 hours. As you start to depart, things can change on you. We've seen that recently as well. So it's a difficult, complex situation at the moment with travel. But will it go back to pre-COVID? It will go back in terms of travel numbers eventually, but it's going to be nowhere near as simple as it was previously.
I'm quite glad I'm not a travel agent. My heart goes out to them, and I think I mentioned this a couple of times on air, but the extraordinary factor being, we've talked about before we started the show, that travel agents don't make a lot of money. The commissions are roughly, and they vary between, say, 3 and 10%. But as you pointed out, that's 3 and 10% of the airfare component. In the case of, I know particularly in an airfare to Niue, Niue had a great airfare of $440 return. 220 of that was taxes. So a travel agent doesn't get commission on the taxes, they get the commission on the actual airfare component.
Yeah. It's a volume game, or you're either a niche player. That's where you have to play in terms of being a travel agent. But the reality is, yes, it's not an industry that produces significant profits. It really is an industry that people get into. They love it. I mean, I've been here 23 years. It feels like more like 5 or 10 only. It goes very quickly. It's an industry, once you're in, you do really have passion for it. But it is also a high turnover, low margin industry. But people do it because the joy of sending someone away on a holiday, and then they come back into the store or back to the broker and show those pictures and the wonderful memories that they've created. We have a saying that money you spend on travel is well spent. It's not actually, you don't actually spend it, you're actually investing in your own personal well-being and everything else. So holidays are something that people need to take, and the opportunity to travel overseas is something that New Zealand has almost got as a birthright. Yeah, because of positioning. I must say just very quickly, one of my favourite memories of being a travel agent, which was a few years ago now, a lady came in, I used to do some talk on Radio Pacific when it was Talk Station, and she'd heard me. She came in, caught the bus in from Manurewa, and sat down to book herself to Sydney. Her husband didn't want to go. She had to save up for 9 months for a trip to Sydney for a week, and so she had to work out a really cheap hotel that was good and safe for her. And when I got organised her passport, and when she came, she caught the bus in from Manurewa just to get her passport. She was so excited. And when she went and she came back, she had a wonderful time. But the coolest thing, about 3 months later, I was walking up Queen Street and I saw this Mrs. Gillan, I always remember her name. And she had a satchel over her shoulder. And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, the trip changed my life." She said, "Just going over and experiencing Sydney. And so I've signed up at university to do a degree." And she did a degree in applied psychology, some extraordinary thing. And I thought, it's just, I was walking on air when I went back to the office there, just a simple little thing like that. Yeah. That's what travel can do for people. Oh, absolutely. I was lucky enough from earlier life, I spent 9 years in the Caribbean.
I was going to say, just tell us, how did you get back into this business?
So I'm a chartered accountant by trade. So I
And you went to travel?
And I went to travel. So then I went over, like people do, went to Europe for 6 months, but always had the intention of going living in the Caribbean. So I dealt with Cayman and Bermuda from New Zealand. And then so I went to Cayman for nine years, worked for Bank of America there most of that time, and just had a ball over there.
Bet.
But what it did was it created an opportunity for me to experience a different culture, something completely different to a little boy from Christchurch, So having 9 years in that kind of environment really inspired me to be to just go and see the world. So I'm lucky enough now to have seen about 40 countries around the globe, and it's about going to see those experiences. You learn about yourself, but you learn about the people over there. And it just makes you a better rounded person, I think, when you travel.
Yeah.
Rather than being self-centred, you actually eyes open and you can see better ways of doing things.
Sure. And you're also a Chief Operating Officer for the House of Travel Group, so you must be a busy person with juggling those two balls.
Oh, I think at the moment everybody in the travel industry is. So travel agents at the moment, 5,000 down to 1,500. We're still dealing with the same number of customers. So those people are working 3 times as hard as they were. They're doing their absolute best to look after their customers as best as they can with all the intricacies and difficulties of working with suppliers. So everybody is really just handling 2 or 3 jobs at once at the moment, and it's all about making sure the business gets through the survival period. It is a survival. We are not out of this at the moment, even with Australia and the Cook's opening. We need more of the mid-haul, long-haul, so Asia through into America.
Any words at all on that? Have you any inside oil for anybody?
No, I think it's all around the vaccination program.
Yeah.
The reality is we see that now the UK is opening up to parts of Europe and Europe's opening up to the UK. They're looking at doing some between Europe and the US, and that's simply because the UK now is at 75%, and the US is well over 50%. Europe's getting well over 30% now for most of the countries there. So the vaccination program is going to be a key to it. The government's been on record to say that they are going to deliver vaccinations for every New Zealander who wants to be vaccinated by Christmas.
Yep.
And so let's hold them to that, because that's their goal that they're going to achieve. Once we get through that, then I think you'll see a significant number of countries being opened up, two-way traffic. And it'll rely on people being vaccinated and having proof of that. And as I say before, we may even have these things like saliva tests out there as well. But it will open up those borders with that vaccination. And
it's on a sad note, it's such a shock to see what's happening in Fiji.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, Fiji's such a popular destination for New Zealanders, and when the reality is we need that one because it's a big volume place, particularly for
they need us.
And they need us, and it's the same as the Cook Islands and Samoa and Tonga and Niue. They're all going to be the same. They rely heavily on tourism, and a lot of that comes from New Zealand.
Yeah.
So, and also the other thing we can't forget about also is families have been away from each other now for 15 months, and if it waits till the end of the year, it's almost going to be 2 years. That's a long time, and a lot of things have happened for families in that period of time. So we do need to get these borders open, because whilst it is a health issue, and we understand, and the government's been right to be conservative about that and make sure the health is making sense in terms of not getting COVID here, there is a mental health issue as well around this, and family being away from family is tough on some people. A lot of things have happened, weddings, deaths, births, etc. And people have missed out on that.
I've got 3 kids and 3 grandkids in London and in the UK, so I can certainly sympathise with that. Yeah, definitely. Yes, it's just no one can crystal ball the future, of course. But in terms of the Travel Agents Association, can you see any change at all going forward? Can you see a strengthening of the organisation? I mean, I think you said 90% of the agents, because I believe one of the major groups, Flight Centres, for many years were not members of TAANZ. They had their own internal system, but they've now joined TAANZ, I believe, in the last year or so. Is that correct?
That's so correct. So
and
where we are now
big change.
Yeah, what we are now is 95% of the voice of outbound tourism. So it is collectively a large voice, and we've got all the major brands now in the family, so to speak, and so we can speak from one voice. And one of the things that COVID's taught us is that when it comes to these sorts of things, we need to work together as an industry. Firstly, to get our messaging across to the government, because there's some considerations there around that,
very much so.
but also to make sure we get the consumer understanding that the problem that we are having in terms of returning refunds or dealing with credits, that we're all saying the same thing, which is the money doesn't sit with the travel agent, as we talked about before. it is sitting with suppliers, but we're doing our best we can to help sort those out. So it's been good to get everybody into the tent, so to speak, and we now speak more as one voice. Obviously, that's only been in the last sort of 6 months.
That's huge. That is really huge.
But going forward, where do we see it? I don't think we'll see the number of stores reopened again. That's just going to be a fact that we are seeing a seismic change in terms of we won't have as many bricks and mortar or retail stores out there. The broker channel will grow. Online will continue to grow, but the word of caution again is that New Zealanders need to know who they're dealing with, because they do not get protected by New Zealand law if it's an overseas company. So there's definitely going to be some changes. And the other thing just to point out is from the business travel point of view, it's really important that they are given the opportunity to travel as well, because from a New Zealand Inc. point of view, it's going to be, again, we're an exporting country. They need to get to their suppliers, they need to get to their customers as well, because that's going to help the whole of the New Zealand economy.
You can only Zoom so many times.
Yeah, we've all got really good at Zoom, but there's nothing like a front-to-front or person-to-person conversation. Yep. And that's, the thing about getting overseas and going for holidays. You can look at them online, but it's not the same as going and seeing the pyramids, or going to London or going to New York or wherever.
Just a quick note on travel insurance too, Brent. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So how crucially important it is to have travel insurance. I know you're not an expert, but I'm sure you've dealt with many travel insurance claims and issues, etc. I've always just maintained that the most crucial part about travel insurance, this is even before COVID, was pre-existing conditions. But you must declare. Yep. And I've known clients who will say to the travel agent, "Oh, you can fill it out for us," and no, don't. You can't. It's so important. And terrible stories have been people get in bad situations because they haven't declared a pre-existing condition. Yep. That still applies, of course, in spades. But how have your relationship been with the travel insurance companies over this COVID period?
Yeah, so there's now you can get insurance, and you can get insurance for COVID, which a lot of people actually get surprised about.
Really? Yeah, okay.
So what it won't cover you for is if the government makes a determination that the borders are going to shut, any additional cost due to that government decision is not going to be covered. But if I'm in a hotel, that hotel gets closed down because someone else in that hotel was found to have COVID, so everybody had to stay, additional costs that are reasonable would tend to be covered by most policies. So many people actually just either don't buy it because they're going to Australia and they think they're not going to need it.
Still not buying it?
No, and the other thing is people need to understand they need to buy it the day they book, not the day before they travel. 38% of all claims, so that's a significant number, more than 1 in every 3 claims actually happens from an event before travel. So people need to get their travel insurance organised the day that they book. And for the cost that it is, it's a small investment to make sure you're going to be okay for a lot of reasons. The claims can be eye-watering, particularly through the States. Unfortunately, my dad was away for work and passed away many years ago in Australia. And so, he had insurance. Now, if he hadn't had insurance, the cost of it was going to be astronomical. If that would have been in the States, it would have been eye-watering. I mean, we have claims upwards of 500,000-600,000. We've had claims of over $1 million in the States
really?
from insurance claims. But even something simple, take my father as an example, had an ambulance ride just literally a few hundred metres down the road. It was a few $100s just to do that, and then it went on from there. Yeah. So, people need to take travel insurance. Some people say, it's not a cost, or if I'm in Australia, I'm going to get covered by their medical things. It's not the case.
No.
That is not the case. Invest in the insurance. It's a small cost. It's a few cups of coffee.
Even if you've got, my daughter's had cerebral palsy, so she travels in a wheelchair. It's no problem getting travel insurance or everything else other than the issue that she's faced with. So that's another important factor. You may have an issue, but it doesn't stop you pre-killing your baggage, your accommodation, your delays, etc. Things like that.
Absolutely, and unfortunately these things do happen. And
tell me about it.
So the insurance book does not necessarily make a lot of money from the travel side of things at all. But people certainly have unfortunately learnt the hard way when they have not had that travel insurance.
During COVID, I was looking to try and do something to keep myself interested and occupied, so I put myself name down to doing extra on some TV shows, right? And to the great mirth of my family and all my friends, I put my name forward to be a dead body and got declined. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine who should remain nameless, called Keith, who said, Ask Brent about his experience as an actor.
Yes. That was
Now, I'm throwing that at you. Come on now. He said you've got to hear this Brent's story.
Yeah. So obviously
Nothing to do with travel, but
nothing to do with travel, but yeah, it is quite an industry. So the firm, which was Tom Cruise
Yes.
and Gene Hackman, were the two main stars. They filmed a lot of that on the island of Cayman, where I was, and they asked for some extras. And I was one of the ones that were chosen to be in a scene. So yeah, so we did a scene around the waterfront of Cayman, where the two of those were in a van going around the waterfront. It was on cruise day, which means 3 days of the week, Cayman Islands has this massive amount of cruise passengers coming in. So there was about 15,000 came off the cruise ships, and there's probably about 2,500 around the waterfront watching this filming going by.
Wow.
And so, you know, here you are as a little old extra standing out in the middle of this massive crowd. So yeah, it was an experience, that's for sure. So
A
yeah.
good one. So you made it to the big time.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. No, it's just a little story from the days there.
Well, Brent, thanks so much for coming in. It's been really good to hear to talk to you. You put a positive spin on what's been a really difficult time, and I think it's just reconfirming again the importance of dealing with a properly bonded travel agent. So
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks again for coming in. Thank you.
Cheers.